And I just want to remind you, these 5 aspects, each one is a lecture in itself. Today, I'm giving you the fast food, concise, speedy version because I only have 1 week here in Vancouver. And so today I'm giving you a lecture in English and tomorrow will be in Chinese. I would have preferred to have more time to develop the subject, but I assure you that each one of these aspects, in the future, I will be explaining them more in detail and how you use each observation, each aspect to affect your own life, to observe things in your life and make changes accordingly. Yeah. So the material is heavy, but it's juicy stuff. Yeah. Okay? And it takes a while to sink in also. So just bag them all up as I tell them, and I'll go real fast. And perhaps if there's time, then I'll open to question and answer. Okay? Yeah. So the third aspect is the prerequisites and the reliances. And then I'll name which 2 they are, 2 sets. All the Buddha's teachings point towards nirvana and liberation, which connect us to the practice of the 2 sets. Now the first set refers to the 4 prerequisites of stream entry. Stream entry meaning entering the stream of liberation. That state of no greed, no hatred, and no ignorance. The second set refers to the 4 reliances of developing wisdom. Okay. Now why these 2 sets needs to be understood in tandem. Because once you know the content, you'll know why. Because the 2 sets, they have to be applied in tandem so that the practitioner can achieve the right equilibrium in the middle path. Okay, equilibrium. It's a very important word in the spiritual practitioner's mind, attitude. Equilibrium, it's opposed to fanaticism, extremism. Yeah. Equilibrium is the way of the middle. The 4 prerequisites of stream entry. And this is coming from the source of the Agama Sutras and the Nikaya Suttas also. 1. Associate with good spiritual advisors. 2. Listen frequently to the right Dharma and allow it to permeate. 3. Reflect and contemplate on the Dharma. 4. Follow the Dharma and practice accordingly. These are the 4 prerequisites of someone who is serious about the spiritual practice. They need to engage in these 4 points. For example, they need to find a teacher. They need to listen to the teachings of the teacher. They need to reflect and contemplate on the teaching itself so that they can follow it and incorporate it, all the teachings in their everyday life. However, this set alone does not tell the whole story. You need to incorporate with the second set. The 4 reliances, okay? And interestingly, it says, what does it say? Rely on or follow the Dharma, not on a person. Okay, so the first one in the prerequisite is associate with good spiritual advisors. Yet on the 4 reliances, it tells you to rely on the Dharma, not on a person. What does it mean? No idolatry. And I'll go into the details when I put them together and read them together. Okay. Second of the 4 reliances is rely on the meaning of the teaching, not on mere words. Okay. Basically, not taking words out of context. Third, rely on definitive, fully revealed teachings, not on the provisional or partially revealed teaching. Fourth, rely on wisdom, not on discriminating consciousness or discriminating thoughts. When we put these 2 together, and this is what we get. rely on the Dharma, not on a person. Okay, associate with good spiritual advisors, all the while relying on the Dharma, not on a person. Why does fanaticism exist in our world? When people follow blindly towards leaders, political leaders or religious leaders. When there is blind faith, humans, out of conformity, will engage in massive destruction. So it is very important to need to associate with, or good spiritual advisors that one deem good, yet at the same time relying on the teaching, understand the teaching, apply the teaching, but not on that person, because that person can teach you something good and yet gives you the wrong instructions. Yeah. Many times, a political leader or a religious leader starts with good intentions. I would say that. I think a lot of people do not become leaders because they want to hurt people. A lot of people want to gather the masses. They want to reach out to more with their thinking. So usually they don't start out with the bad intentions or wrong intentions. But what happens when they start to gather force of the people? What happens to the ego? The self inflates. And one begins, instead of reducing greed and hatred, one's greed and hatred increases and the ignorance increases as they gather the masses. And then they could be teaching something good, yet the instructions, the actions that they make their followers engage in are counter their own teachings. So if we, as followers or seekers of the truth, we follow teachings instead of people, then we will never get engaged in fanaticism. There's that equilibrium. It's hard to practice without good teachers, granted. But it's even harder to practice when one has blind faith on a teacher, because one never develops that ability to tell the good from the bad. One always relying on someone else. It's just like some people would write to me, 师父, or teacher, what do you think of this number? And then my question is, what number? This number for my house, the house I'm going to buy. What do you think about this house? Well, what? What do you think about this license plate? Which one do you choose? Which number is better? Phone number is better. So what have I been teaching? I've been telling people to pick the number that you feel easier to remember, that you like. But why consult these things towards a spiritual teacher? That's when people start to have blind faith. And then that's why the reliance and the prerequisites should go hand in hand. Yeah. One should find the equilibrium in the correlation of one to another. So associate with good spiritual advisors, all the while relying on the Dharma, not on the person. Okay. If the doctrines that a person teaches agrees with the right Dharma, then one can place faith in them and confidence. Accept what he says and put them into practice. And the Buddha warns us about worshiping idols, which often turns into obsession, fanaticism, and irrational behavior. One particular verse that Buddha recites in Dhammapada, in one of the verses of wisdom, it says, rely on yourself. Rely on the teachings. Do not rely on anything else. Basically, the practice, the spiritual path is to incorporate the teachings in your daily life so that you develop the wisdom and the eye to make decisions. You're not trying to rely on an individual. or a group. Yeah, it's too dangerous that way. Okay. The other. Rely on the meaning of the teaching, not on mere words. Okay. So listen frequently to the right Dharma and allow it to permeate, all the while relying on the meaning of the teaching, not on mere words. Be careful about taking words out of context or misinterpreting a translation. Understand that Buddhism has an acid test. The truth has an acid test. The 3 Dharma seals. Yeah. Be careful about, I'll give you an example. In one of the texts it says, the Bodhisattva Maitreya does not practice concentration, does not sever defilements. In the translation, literally from the Chinese. So what does that mean? Bodhisattva Maitreya doesn't practice. But no. The explanation that follows the verse, these are verses. Explanation says, Bodhisattva Maitreya does not practice deep concentration, useless concentration, or deep concentration that does not help in the liberation. The Bodhisattva Maitreya does not sever all defilements. In what sense? The Bodhisattva Maitreya, out of compassion, maintain that little attachment for the suffering sentient beings. Therefore, he does not enter into nirvana for the sake of helping others. That would be the more accurate explanation of this particular line. Yeah. So one should understand where is that equilibrium, where the balance lies. Okay. Third, rely on definite teaching, not on provisional teaching. Okay. And it goes with number 3 of the prerequisites of stream entry, which says, reflect and contemplate on the Dharma, all the while relying on definitive teaching, not on provisional. Okay. Definitive teachings are fully revealed, not partially revealed like provisional. There is a particular, what do you call it? A metaphor. A building of 3 stories. Okay, so some guy in the Lotus Sutra, one person sees that his neighbor built a building of 3 floors, and he loves the 3rd floor, the top floor, awesome. 1 and 2, not so great. So he says to the architect, build me a house, but don't build me number 1 and 2. Just build me number 3. So I don't want the foundation. I just want the last, the end result, the last floor, the highest floor. No, it doesn't work like that. So when one reads what we called partially revealed teaching, one should understand that when one reads it, one feels connected to it. Why? Because it has more relevance to oneself at that stage in practice. But one should understand that this building has 3 floors. So if you're on floor number 1 or you're in the foundation, you understand that you're on the foundation, but eventually you want to build floor 1, 2, and 3. Vice versa, when one is on the 3rd floor already, one should understand that someone else may not be able to be building the 3rd floor, but someone else needs to start on the foundation. Yeah. So that's why each teaching has its own relevance to the practitioner. Now, if we understand all the teachings of the universal truth as being fully revealed and partially revealed, will we discriminate against, or would we discriminate against people of different thinking? No. Because we understand because we have the panoramic view or understanding, okay, so that's why this person is in this stage. And if one understands, then one maintains the compassion in the attitude. One does not have arrogance when it's discussing philosophical standpoints. Yeah. Definitive teachings refer to the ultimate meaning principle. Its acid test is the 3 Dharma seals. So basically, these 2 sets are related to the 3 Dharma seal, the second aspect. Okay. Last but not least, follow the Dharma and practice accordingly, all the while relying on wisdom, not on discriminating consciousness. What we call discriminating consciousness. It's basically anything that is triggered by our senses. And then we attributed a certain sense of reality and permanence to it. It is the emotions instead of equanimity. It is the passion instead of compassion. Those are discriminating consciousness. When one relies on wisdom, that wisdom is something that has the element of compassion in it. Yeah. So one will be able to manifest oneself with compassion, with humility, with all the qualities, virtues corresponding. And I'll give you an example of a meditative state when it's talking about wisdom. What is wisdom in a state of absorption in meditation? We all know that this body is made up of cells. And cells are made up of atoms, right? So how many of you have seen the atoms in your own body? Not in a photograph, huh? You, with your inner eye, see yourself in that. Meditative experience, what we called samatha and vipassana, the practice in Buddhism, allows oneself to see one's own essence as it is. And that is wisdom. When we say, beauty is impermanent, yeah, but I still need Lancome. Right? That's a particular brand, right? Lancome or Dior or whatever, right? When we say, the beauty it's fading, it changes with time, but at the same time, no, but I still want to look pretty, and then try to hide the footprint of time through makeup or clothing or something like that. But that's because we understand impermanence from a discriminating consciousness point of view. It's just a concept. It's not through wisdom that we understand it. Imagine yourself seeing your whole body as nothing more than atoms vibrating and with bond energy and bond within atom to atom. Then will you have doubt that your body is impermanent? No. You see it directly. So when it's talking about relying on that wisdom, it's talking about the direct experience of the truth. It is not a mere concept. It is not words. Yeah. Okay. Next. The 4 Siddhantas. Siddhanta is a word in Sanskrit. That means teaching mode, purpose, principle, or objective. Okay, Siddhanta. This idea of the Siddhantas was introduced by a famous, very important Buddhist master, Nagarjuna. How many of you have heard the name Nagarjuna before? In Chinese it would be Long Su Pusa. Some people. Okay. Nagarjuna. He said, All of the Buddha's teachings are included in the 4 Siddhantas. Basically, all of the Buddha's teachings serve 4 objectives, 4 purposes, are based on 4 principles. Okay? And in every teaching among the infinite teachings of the Buddha is true and mutually non-contradictory. How so non-contradictory? Every teaching, it's in accordance with a certain need, it's a cure for a certain disease. It is a remedy for a certain problem, a solution for a certain problem. Once the problem is solved, then you need something else. Yeah. So there are 4 objectives, 4 principles, okay, which are these 4. The 4 Siddhantas are worldly Siddhanta, a worldly principle. Second, individually adapted Siddhanta. Third, therapeutic Siddhanta. And the 4th, ultimate meaning Siddhanta. These are the 4. Basically, you can apply these 4 principles to observe all human thinking. Not just Buddhism, everything. And I'll give you examples of them. Okay, worldly principle. It refers to the Buddha's teachings that adapt to the local customs and people's desire. The purpose is to entice and guide people towards entering Dharma gate. It basically entice people to practice, to enter into spirituality. Okay. It is for those beginners who lack interest, the Buddha tries to arouse the joy and interest in them. Give people what they crave. And you know the example I gave you? When someone reads the Amitabha Sutra, and someone who never had those buckets of gold and silver, and then read a sutra describing a certain glory, the wealth, and all these things, and then one feels with admiration and feels with a longing to be there. Yeah, over there I will never be poor again. Yeah, but at the same time, it is to give them what? Something that they crave in their life. Okay? Individually adapted. These are teachings that inspire people to do good and to seek a better life. Okay? Or a better future. How so? Sutras or scriptures or texts or thinkings that make you see or fear for a retribution. You do good, you do bad to people, then you harm people, you will be harmed. You do good, you will be compensated. These things actually entice people to do good. Okay, so that's why they're called the individually adapted, for the procurement of good, of wholesomeness. Okay, they are taught in accordance with the different disposition of the people, depending what is that they need, what they need in order to entice the goodness in them. Now, the difference between the worldly principle and this principle of individually adapted principle is that you give people what they need, not what they crave. There's a difference between giving people what they need and giving people what they desire or crave. And later I'll give you an example of a kid going to a dentist, and explaining the 4 principles together. Yeah. Let's run through the theoretical part first. Third will be the therapeutic principle. Okay. These are teachings aimed at specific illnesses or shortcomings of a practitioner. The purpose of this principle is to cure them of their illnesses, guiding them to do no evil and to do all good. Okay, so example of this
And there are a lot of therapeutic principle teachings in the Buddha's text. For example, someone who has a lot of hatred within, the Buddha will teach them the metta meditation, how to arouse loving kindness from within, and how to practice it, how to permeate oneself with loving kindness and subdue the hatred. When someone has a more scattered mind and then have a lot of distracted thought, the Buddha teaches anapanasati, how to focus on the breathing so that your mind is more, one-pointed, more focused, less distracted. When one is obsessed with one's own appearance and beauty, then the Buddha would tell them to observe the impermanence, the meditation on impermanence, even the meditation on impurities of the aging process. Those things will actually help that person who is suffering from a certain delusion or illusion, then to come out from that illusion, to break that wrong habitual tendency of thinking. Okay. Last but not least, okay. Now I want to give you an example of the wrong kind of therapeutic principle. And then this happens a lot. A lot of people, especially older generation, they like to recommend medicine to people, or at least in the Chinese culture we do. Mom and dad eats a certain medicine and we tell the friend, "Wow, this stuff is good, cures all." Okay, so this old lady, has a high blood pressure. Goes to the doctor and the doctor gives him a drug to lower pressure. And then this lady has a friend who has low blood pressure. And then she recommends the lowering blood pressure medicine to someone who already has low blood pressure. What are we talking about? That will kill the lady. Basically, therapeutic principle has to be relevant to that particular disease. It has to be cure for the disease. Yeah. And some things are not cures. Okay? Just give you an example. Fourth, ultimate meaning principle refers to the Buddha's teachings that reveal the true reality of the Dharma. And then the true reality is determined by what? By the 3 Dharma seals. Aspect number 2. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 are related, and then number 4 basically categorizes them. The purpose is to lead practitioners to perfect enlightenment, ultimate meaning principle. The teachings of non-self, the teachings of impermanence, and then the teaching of what we called dependent origination. Basically, this entire universe, everything that exists in this universe is due to causes and conditions. Where condition exists, something will emerge, will surge, will come to be. When conditions are lacking, something will cease to be. And that is a cycle of the universe, be it physical phenomenon or mental phenomena. Okay. Now, this teaching is extremely deep, difficult to understand, and difficult to realize. Basically, the ultimate meaning principle are things that are realized. When one applies the first principle, the worldly principle, or one has come through, understood the individually adaptive principle, and then one has also practiced the therapeutic principle, when they manage all these principles, then they will realize which one, the ultimate meaning. Yeah. So that's why there are rules to these 4. There's an observation, a relationship of these 4. Okay. The first 3 principles are mutable and may be diluted, like milk. Basically, the worldly principle, the individually adaptive, and the therapeutic principle, they can change, they can evolve in content according to time, place, and people. Only the ultimate meaning principle transcends all defects, cannot be modified or altered. Okay? Now, the essence of Buddhism, or this, what we call the universal truth as we think it represents, it's in its ultimate meaning principle. It is what makes Buddhism unique. However, notwithstanding, the other three principles are just as important. And then the fact that we understand that there are these four categories of principles or objectives allows us to understand different thinking and have a panoramic view instead of a discriminating, conflicting, and in what we call rejecting attitude towards other thinkings. Especially, there are many philosophical thinkings in our world that promote goodness in its own way. Yeah. Okay, so here is the analogy of a kid seeing a dentist. The kid has a tooth cavity. After insufferable pain, he does not want to go to the dentist. And the mother said, you need to go. And then he's in agony. And then finally, the mother drags him to the dentist. Dentist, at seeing the kid, says, I'm going to give you a lollipop and a balloon if you let me check your teeth. What gave him the cavity in the first place anyways? It was all the candies and the lollipops that he ate. But the dentist would say to him, hey, come on, kid. You sit there, and I promise you a lollipop at the end of this session. So what is that? Worldly principle. Okay? Now the kid is there, and then the dentist checks up on him and said, I'm going to give you cartoon toothpaste. Toothpaste with the cartoon figures and stuff like that. And I'll give you a brush and dental floss. Okay? So it's what? Individually adapted principle. And then, obviously, if the kid has a tooth cavity, the dentist has to pull it. Once he pulls it, what is that? Therapeutic principle. Okay? So, before the kid leaves, what would the dentist teach the kid? We teach them how to brush properly, how to maintain healthy teeth. And that would be, in a way, ultimate meaning principle. So these are the four principles explained in this kind of, with a kid, the example of a kid going to a dentist. What we don't want to do as practitioners is always be looking for worldly principles in our life. Always taking things that will give us cavity, right? And then not willing to go to the dentist. We should be developing, understanding what are the ultimate principle teachings, and then try to understand it, even though we might not be able to incorporate it completely, but we actually try to understand what does the third floor looks like, all the while we are trying to build the foundation, first and second floor. Okay. So that would be the fourth aspects of the integral vision. And I want to share with you a verse. I forgot to take out the motion. Okay, here. Let's read with me, please. Everyone relies on his own view. Frivolous discourse generates disputes. If one has knowledge of another's errors, this passes for knowledge of the corrective view. If one cannot bear to accept another's doctrine, such one is a foolish person. Whosoever engages in these debates is truly a foolish person. Okay. This verse is actually it's written by Nagarjuna. When he proposed the idea of the four principles, four siddhantas, he closes the explanation with this particular verse, and it's actually longer, but I just pull out the part that you need to kind of, if not memorize, but just understand, is that as human beings, when we are in this path of spiritual seeking, spiritual path, we need to understand that we will come into different thinking at different times, different philosophies. Rather than having a very, very narrow way of looking at things, it's better to have a more compassionate and embracing attitude towards all thinkings. Especially, it's a thinking that allows you to benefit others. Okay? It could carry the name of any religion. It could carry the name of any organization. It could be it could be a different title of a book. It doesn't matter. One should try to understand the different teachings or different philosophies with an open mind. That is the only way that us as human beings, we can actually remain compassionate in our search, in our journey. Because religion, or at least from the perspective of Buddhism, if Buddhism is practiced with a narrow mind, one would have turned dharma into what? Dogma. Dogma is rigid. Dharma is flexible. Dharma is flexible, yet based on certain principles. These principles, in the second aspect, I would explain, the 3 Dharma seals. Okay? And now we'll move into the most boring part of the 5 aspects, which is the history of Buddhism. And I left it at the end for a very good reason. Yeah. If the other 4 didn't put you to sleep, this one will. Buddhism in India lasted about 1,700 years. In total, till now, has been 2,500 years. Now, as a world religion, it's 2,500 years old. Now, the culture in India has been very, and still very complex. So for someone to understand how Buddhism is taught in its, and how the philosophy of Buddhism developed, one should also understand the culture in India. Yeah, to have a better idea why certain symbolism are represented in that way. For example, how do ancient people in India talk about distances? Yojana. They say, how far is that village, the next village? And they will say, it is as far as when the chicken, will make a noise, you can't hear it. Or as under the rooster. It is as far as when the rooster, when it make a noise, how do you say it in English? Croaks? Croaks. It is as far as when the rooster croaks, you can't hear it. That's the way they use symbolism, using daily life, and then apply it to distances, where the sound travels up to that point, and they call that. Yeah. And so, when we read Buddhist texts, we have to have a lot of imagination, because in the Avatamsaka Sutra says, the Buddha was born from the right side or arm, below the arm of the mother. How so? How are you born from? How? Remember the 4 castes? In ancient India, in the belief of Brahmanism, they believe that human beings are born from the Brahma. So Brahma, it says that if you are born in the Brahman caste, then you're born from the mouth, the head of the Brahma. If you are from the ruling class, you're born from the chest of the Brahma. If you're from the farmer or what do you call it, merchants, then you from the stomach of Brahma. And then if you are the slave class, you're born from the feet of the Brahma. So the Buddha, Siddhartha, Siddhartha Gautama, he was a prince. He was from the ruling class. Therefore, he was born from the side of the mother. Okay? So these are things, very, very interesting symbolisms, comparisons, things of the cultural aspects of India. And then when you understand these things, then you can actually understand the Buddhist texts better because they're very rich in symbolism. Now, this is just to show you how Buddhism traveled over the years. It all started here in India, and this is the river Ganges, okay, right here, river Ganges. So Buddhism traveled north, south to Sri Lanka, and then from the southern region, it traveled to Burma. And then northern region traveled to Tibet, and through the Silk Road, it traveled to India. To China. From China to Taiwan, and then from Taiwan it traveled to here, Canada. That's us. And then as you can see, Buddhism started here and then expanded everywhere. And it's very interesting because how many of you have traveled to India? Or would like to travel to India? Or have seen documentaries about India? I have to tell you one thing. If one can be enlightened in India, one can be enlightened anywhere. If you understand what I mean. The disparity of the rich and the poor and the really, really poor, that range, it's not easy to fathom here in Canada, in plain Vancouver. When you travel and you see the majestic building, Taj Mahal, and right beside there is this slump, and you understand that even 2,500 years ago, it was like that. So if anyone can be in that environment, and with everything all the riches that one has, and still decide to go and pursue the spiritual path, wow. So that saying should be, if you can be enlightened in India, you can be enlightened anywhere. Isn't there a term? If it can be there, you can make it in there. You can make it anywhere. Right? But anyways, okay. So I think as far as history of Buddhism, I'm going to close up with this last diagram. Here. This is the diagram, with timeline of the Buddha's birth and then the different periods in Buddhism. Okay? So there is the early Buddhism, original and pre-sectarian Buddhism, sectarian Buddhism, early Mahayana, late Mahayana, esoteric Mahayana Buddhism. Okay? And so the Buddhism that you see nowadays in, be it Tibetan Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism, Burmese, Thailand, different aspects of Buddhism, they represent text and spiritual practices in one of these periods, if not more than one of these periods. Okay. So when I'm in South America and people ask me, so, pardon my ignorance, which lineage, to me, what kind of Buddhist are you? And my answer is the same as my teacher's answer. I am just a Buddhist. I'm just a Buddhist and a Buddhist monk. I'm not one or the other. Yes, I receive my transmission from Chinese Buddhism in Taiwan, okay? But I am just simply a Buddhist because it is my belief that through these 5 aspects, understanding these 5 aspects that I introduced today, one can become a seeker of spirituality with open-mindedness and also that humility and maintaining that compassion for all other thinkings. Yeah. So I'm just a Buddhist, not a not to be coined into any tradition, be it Mahayana, Hinayana, all these different terms that there exist out there. Okay? Right. So that finishes my lecture today. Now, what I want to do is we have to do a transference of merits. And let me explain that to you. Listening to the Dharma or being together, gathered together here, we are trying to further our search in spirituality. And that generates positive energy or negative energy. Positive energy. That generates goodness, wholesomeness, or unwholesomeness. Wholesomeness. So therefore, having gathered this energy here, we should share this energy with other people. Okay, and I'll teach you how to do it. Please sit very comfortably, even against the chair, the back of your chair, and then close your eyes, please. Okay. And then I want you to visualize yourself happy, with a smile on your face, see your own face in front of you, okay, with your eyes closed, and seeing yourself with your inner mind's eye that you are smiling, you are happy. And then repeat the verses after me. May I be free from enmity.
May I be free from envy.
May I be free from hatred.
May I be free from hatred.
May I be free from suffering.
May I be free from suffering.
May I be filled with happiness.
May I be filled with happiness.
Okay, feeling this loving kindness, this positive energy from within, and this is almost like a light inside you. Now let us radiate this internal light towards the entire country, towards everyone and every being that live in Canada. And repeat after me. May all beings within Canada be free from enmity. May they be free from hatred. May they be free from suffering. May they be filled with happiness. And now we will remove all the obstacles, all the walls, all the limitations, and try to radiate this light, this good energy towards all beings in the universe. And repeat after me. May all beings in the universe be free from enmity. May they be free from hatred. May they be free from suffering. May they be filled with happiness. And now I want to give yourself 1 minute and then visualize someone in your life, someone who desperately needs good energy, good vibes, someone who is in a very unfortunate situation in the moment. Visualize their faces in front of you and in your mind wish them well. Send them this good energy. Take 1 minute to do so.